Coming up in today's show, we find out what the world's population, well, at least in 2 countries, really think about AI. We also discover what some of our world leaders think as the G7 focus on AI in their very first day together in Japan. ChatGPT comes to the Apple Store and simultaneously gets banned by Apple. The launch of WatsonX brings IBM's enterprise-facing fight to the generative AI table. At the Tesla annual shareholder meeting this week, we got a glimpse of the latest Tesla AI robots in action, and why Elon Musk thinks Tesla cars are due their ChatGPT moment, as well as why Twitter is fighting Microsoft over use of its data. And in our main story this week, appearing before the US Congress, Tim Elsom of OpenAI, Christina Montgomery of IBM, and Gary Marcus of New York University swear in to discuss potential AI regulation. And finally, what happens when an English premiership football manager wades into the great AI debate? I'm Tim Elsom and you're watching EYE4AI, bringing the very latest in artificial intelligence to all of humanity.
Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, oh. I never seen anybody do the things you do before.
Around the world, generative AI and AI in general has had a huge boost in the public conscience, driving consumers, businesses and governments alike to face up to not only its future potential, but the risks that could go along with speedy adoption. It wasn't long ago that letter, co-signed by Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak and Gary Marcus, to name but 3, as well as thousands of others, called for a 6-month pause on the development of systems more powerful than that of GPT-4. But what about the common people? 2 polls released this week shed light on what you and I really think, and it seems we're just as concerned. A Reuters Ipsos poll found that the number of Americans who see bad times ahead because of AI is 3 times the number of those who don't. According to the data, 61% believe that AI poses risks to humanity, while only 22% disagreed, and 17% remained unsure. Meanwhile, here in the UK, the sentiment is seemingly shared by at least one well-known demographic, the Daily Telegraph reader. One of the UK's oldest right-leaning broadsheet newspapers conducted an exclusive poll, finding that a whopping 72% of their readers think AI is developing too fast, although less than 12 months ago, 60% of the same readers also thought that Liz Truss was the overwhelming choice for PM of the UK, and she then lasted a record-shattering 49 days and slightly less than a celebrity lettuce. Arriving in Japan this week, the leaders of the G7 nations leaned right into the new AI revolution, saying the governance of this tech has not really kept up with its growth, and they called for the development and adoption of standards to keep artificial intelligence trustworthy. They continued that the rules should be in line with our shared democratic values and that they need to immediately take stock of the opportunities and challenges of generative AI. Whilst the G7 played catch-up, the European Union, who also attend the G7, patted themselves on the back as it moved closer this week to passing the Artificial Intelligence Act, likely to be the world's first comprehensive AI law of any major country or region. We want AI systems to be accurate, reliable, safe and non-discriminatory, regardless of their origin, European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said on Friday. It's just fascinating looking at the responses of governments and legislators across the world right now. The approaches to AI regulation in the West are a little in contrast to China's seemingly more restrictive policy. The focus of the draft EU legislation, for example, seems to focus on the safety of its citizens first, whilst China revealed draft measures in April to align generative AI-powered services very much to the needs of the state, saying the content generated by the generative artificial intelligence should reflect the core values of socialism and must not contain subversion of state power, overthrow of the socialist system, incitement to split the country, or undermine national unity. Eek. No longer do you need to go to your web browser to use ChatGPT, or indeed suffer from all the fake and unofficial apps impersonating it, claiming to be powered by ChatGPT, but they're not. This week, OpenAI announced the launch of an official iOS app that allows users to access it natively on their mobile devices. It's free to use, there shouldn't be any ads, and it will allow voice input, which might even give Siri a bit of a run for its money. But alas, for non-US and Android users, we'll have to wait a little while longer, as neither are provided for right now. Meanwhile, with rather ironic timing, at the same time as adding ChatGPT to the App Store, Apple has banned the internal use of the product by its staff for work-related activity, for fear that the AI could share its corporate confidential information. There's also rumours that the company may be working on its own LLM to rival ChatGPT and Bard. Now, in the enterprise space, probably one of the longest established AI brands, Watson, IBM's jeopardy-busting AI suite, has been updated and extended with the announcement of WatsonX this week, an AI and data platform for building enterprise-level AI solutions in what is a direct response to other more consumer-facing developments that have caught the public imagination. At the company's annual Think conference in Orlando this week, there was much talk of generative AI. Dr. Dario Gil, IBM SVP and Director of Research, led the charge.
WatsonX is our new integrated data and AI platform. It consists of three primary parts. First, WatsonX.data. It is our massive curated data repository that is ready to be tapped to train and fine-tune models with state-of-the-art data management system. WatsonX.ai. This is an enterprise studio to train, validate, tune, and deploy traditional machine learning and foundation models that provide generative capabilities. And WatsonX.governance. This is a powerful set of tools to ensure your AI is executing responsibly.
With its machine learning and AI foundation models, WatsonX should enable enterprises to quickly train and deploy custom AI capabilities that are both secure and trustworthy. It's not the first tech company to come out with this sort of platform. Google, AWS Databricks, to name but two, that also have AI development tooling built in. But Watson is well established in the enterprise market with good market share and is well liked by the analysts, so should see plenty of success in the current bull market for AI. Just under 2 years ago, we first met Tesla's humanoid robot called Optimus. Well, more optimistic than Optimus, the pitch started pretty badly with an actual human being pretending to be a robot. Well, unsurprisingly for a Musk-owned company, things have moved on a little since then, and at the annual shareholder meeting in Texas this week, the Tesla bot update showed a video of 5 of the robots performing human-like tasks, walking together, picking up and dropping things, and more. It may be a little way from Musk's previous claim that it would one day fix the labour crisis, but they're certainly coming along nicely. However, they're not quite up to Boston Dynamics' Atlas, probably the world's most advanced humanoid robot, which has been learning some new tricks recently. Atlas finally has some hands to speak of, and in this video, Atlas not only attempts to do some work, but some pretty cool parkour to boot. Just wow. Meanwhile, in AI land, Musk believes Tesla is the actual leader in AI, adding, "I'm not sure who is second, frankly." He told reporters, "I think Tesla will have a sort of ChatGPT moment. Maybe if not this year, I'd say no later than next year." That's the time frame he sees for a truly autonomous driving system rolling out to Tesla cars. When that technology is ready, Musk said, suddenly 3 million cars will be able to drive themselves with no one, and then 5 million cars, and so on. And that could be extremely profitable for Tesla in several ways, as Tesla cars could generate revenue for their owners, and of course Tesla, as no-driver taxis, whilst the owner is busy elsewhere. That could completely transform the business model of the car industry overnight. And so to our main story. Not since Zuckerberg and Dorsey faced a judiciary committee on the 17th of November 2020 has a technology discussion on Capitol Hill been so widely anticipated. That one was about why the big social media firms should continue to benefit from an exemption in an old 1996 law known as Section 230, which gives them protection against lawsuits for user content they host. This one was about AI. The Senate committee is one of the most influential committees in Congress. Its broad jurisdiction gives it a pretty important role as a forum for the public discussion of social and constitutional issues. Top billing this week at the Oversight of AI Rules for Artificial Intelligence hearing went to Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI. But less widely reported, IBM's Chief Privacy and Trust Officer, Christina Montgomery, as well as AI guru Gary Marcus, Professor Emeritus of New York University, were also there to give testimony. Starting with a parlor trick repeated by so many of us for different reasons across the world in recent months, Senator Richard Blumenthal used a ChatGPT-generated speech and AI voice cloning of himself to open the hearing. He went on to describe the incredible use cases becoming possible through the use of AI.
They are no longer fantasies of science fiction. They are real and present. The promises of curing cancer or developing new understandings of physics and biology or modeling climate and weather, all very encouraging and hopeful. but we also know the potential harms. And we've seen them already: weaponized disinformation, housing discrimination, harassment of women and impersonation fraud, voice cloning, deep fakes. These are the potential risks despite the other rewards. And for me, perhaps the biggest nightmare is the looming new industrial revolution, the displacement of millions of workers, the loss of huge numbers of jobs, the need to prepare for this new industrial revolution in skill training and relocation that may be required. And already industry leaders are calling attention to those challenges. Now we have the obligation to do it on AI before the threats and the risks become real. Sensible safeguards are not in opposition to innovation. Accountability is not a burden, far from it. They are the foundation of how we can move ahead while protecting public trust. They are how we can lead the world in technology and science, but also in promoting our democratic values.
John Hawley also outlined the concerns they wanted to consider.
You know, a year ago, we couldn't have had this hearing because the technology that we're talking about had not burst into public consciousness. That gives us a sense, I think, of just how rapidly this technology that we're talking about today is changing and evolving and transforming our world right before our very eyes. I was talking with someone just last night, a researcher in the field of psychiatry, who was pointing out to me that the ChatGPT and generative AI, these large language models, it's really like the invention of the internet in scale, at least, and potentially far, far more significant than that. We could be looking at one of the most significant technological innovations in human history. And I think my question is, what kind of an innovation is it going to be? Is it going to be like the printing press that diffused knowledge and power and learning widely across the landscape, that empowered ordinary, everyday individuals, that led to greater flourishing, that led above all to greater liberty? Or is it going to be more like the atom bomb? Huge technological breakthrough, but the consequences, severe, terrible, continue to haunt us to this day. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think any of us in the room know the answer to that question, because I think the answer has not yet been written. And to a certain extent, it's up to us here and to us as the American people to write the answer. What kind of technology will this be? How will we use it to better our lives? How will we use it to actually harness the power of technological innovation for the good of the American people, for the liberty of the American people, not for the power of the few? You know, I was reminded of the psychologist and writer Carl Jung, who said at the beginning of the last century that our ability for technological innovation, our capacity for technological revolution had far outpaced our ethical and moral ability to apply and harness the technology we developed. That was a century ago. I think the story of the 20th century largely bore him out. And I just wonder, what will we say as we look back at this moment about these new technologies, about generative AI, about these language models, and about the host of other AI capacities that are even right now under development, not just in this country, but in China, at the countries of our adversaries, and all around the world. I mean, I think the question that Jung posed is really the question that faces us. Will we strike that balance between technological innovation and our ethical and moral responsibility to humanity, to liberty, to the freedom of this country? And I hope that today's hearing will take us a step closer to that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The three witnesses, representing one of the youngest and one of the oldest companies in AI tech, as well as a leading voice in artificial intelligence, then set out their opening statements regarding the need for regulation. First came Sam Altman.
My name is Sam Altman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of OpenAI. OpenAI was founded on the belief that artificial intelligence has the potential to improve nearly every aspect of our lives, but also that it creates serious risks we have to work together to manage. We're here because people love this technology. We think it can be a printing press moment. We have to work together to make it so. We are proud of the progress that we made, GPT-4 is more likely to respond helpfully and truthfully and refuse harmful requests than any other widely deployed model of similar capability. However, we think that regulatory intervention by governments will be critical to mitigate the risks of increasingly powerful models. For example, the US government might consider a combination of licensing and testing requirements for development and release of AI models above a threshold of capabilities. There are several other areas I mentioned in my written testimony where I believe that companies like ours can partner with governments, including ensuring that the most powerful AI models adhere to a set of safety requirements, facilitating processes to develop and update safety measures, and examining opportunities for global coordination.
Next up was IBM's Christina Montgomery.
Thank you for today's opportunity to present. AI is not new, but it's certainly having a moment. Recent breakthroughs in generative AI and the technology's dramatic surge in the public attention has rightfully raised serious questions at the heart of today's hearing. What are AI's potential impacts on society? What do we do about bias? What about misinformation, misuse, or harmful content generated by AI systems? Senators, these are the right questions, and I applaud you for convening today's hearing to address them head on. While AI may be having its moment, the moment for government to play a role has not passed us by. This period of focused public attention on AI is precisely the time to define and build the right guardrails to protect people and their interests. But at its core, AI is just a tool, and tools can serve different purposes. To that end, IBM urges Congress to adopt a precision regulation approach to AI. This means establishing rules to govern the deployment of AI in specific use cases, not regulating the technology itself. Such an approach would involve four things. First, different rules for different risks. The strongest regulation should be applied to use cases with the greatest risks to people and society. Second, clearly defining risks. There must be clear guidance on AI uses or categories of AI-supported activity that are inherently high risk. This common definition is key to enabling a clear understanding of what regulatory requirements will apply in different use cases and contexts. Third, be transparent. So AI shouldn't be hidden. Consumers should know when they're interacting with an AI system and that they have recourse to engage with a real person should they so desire. No person anywhere should be tricked into interacting with an AI system. And finally, showing the impact. For higher risk use cases, companies should be required to conduct impact assessments that show how their systems perform against tests for bias and other ways that they could potentially impact the public and to attest that they've done so. By following risk-based use case-specific approach at the core of precision regulation, Congress can mitigate the potential risks of AI without hindering innovation. But businesses also play a critical role in ensuring the responsible deployment of AI. Companies active in developing or using AI must have strong internal governance, including, among other things, designating a lead AI ethics official responsible for an organization's trustworthy AI strategy, standing up an ethics board or a similar function as a centralized clearinghouse for resources to help guide implementation of that strategy. IBM has taken both of these steps, and we continue calling on our industry peers to follow suit.
And finally, Gary Marcus of NYU.
Thank you, Senators. Today's meeting is historic. I'm profoundly grateful to be here. I come as a scientist, someone who's founded AI companies, and as someone who genuinely loves AI, but who is increasingly worried. There are benefits, but we don't yet know whether they will outweigh the risks. Fundamentally, these new systems are going to be destabilizing. They can and will create persuasive lies at a scale humanity has never seen before. Outsiders will use them to affect our elections, insiders to manipulate our markets and our political systems. Democracy itself is threatened. Chatbots will also clandestinely shape our opinions, potentially exceeding what social media can do. Choices about data sets that AI companies use will have enormous unseen influence. Those who choose the data will make the rules, shaping society in subtle but powerful ways. There are other risks too, many stemming from the inherent unreliability of current systems. And I think this one's going to be different, and the real question is over what time scale. Is it going to be 10 years? Is it going to be 100 years? And I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question. I think in the long run, so-called artificial general intelligence really will replace a large fraction of human jobs. We're not that close to artificial general intelligence. Despite all of the media hype and so forth, I would say that what we have right now is just a small sampling of the AI that we will build. In 20 years, people will laugh at this, as I think it was Senator Hawley made the but maybe Senator Durbin made the example about this. It was Senator Durbin made the example about cell phones. When we look back at the AI of today, 20 years ago, we'll be like, wow, that stuff was really unreliable. It couldn't really do planning, which is an important technical aspect. Its reasoning abilities were limited. But when we get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, maybe let's say it's 50 years, that really is going to have, I think, profound effects on labor. And there's just no way around that. And last, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I will note that Sam's worst fear, I do not think, is employment, and he never told us what his worst fear actually is, and I think it's germane to find out.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Altman if he cares to respond.
Yeah. Look, we have tried to be very clear about the magnitude of the risks here. I think jobs and employment and what we're all going to do with our time really matters. I agree that when we get to very powerful systems, the landscape will change. I think I'm just more optimistic that we are incredibly creative and we find new things to do with better tools, and that will keep happening. My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world. I think that could happen in a lot of different ways. It's why we started the company. It's big part of why I'm here today and why we've been here in the past and we've been able to spend some time with you. I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong, and we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government to prevent that from happening, but we try to be very clear-eyed about what the downside case is and the work that we have to do to mitigate that.
Pretty incredible to hear Sam tell us that AI could cause significant harm to the world, and to see all three accepting and even calling for regulation of the industry, particularly in newer, more critical use cases, albeit in ways that don't hold back its development unduly, and I think in IBM's case suggesting that that should be specific to the need of each situation. The hearing then went on to explore the idea of election interference with new AI models, better predicting voter intentions and then finely tuning strategies to elicit particular behaviours from those voters. It then turned back to the thorny issue of regulation and liability.
Permit me to share with you three hypotheses that I would like you to assume for the moment to be true. Hypothesis number one, many members of Congress do not understand artificial intelligence. Hypothesis number two, that absence of understanding may not prevent Congress from plunging in with enthusiasm and trying to regulate this technology in a way that could hurt this technology. Hypothesis number three that I would like you to assume, there is likely a berserk wing of the artificial intelligence community that intentionally or unintentionally could use artificial intelligence to kill all of us and hurt us the entire time that we are dying. Assume all of those to be true. Please tell me in plain English 2 or 3 reforms, regulations, if any, that you would implement if you were queen or king for a day. Ms. Montgomery.
I think it comes back again to transparency and explainability in AI. We absolutely need to know and have companies attest.
What do you mean by transparency?
So disclosure of the data that's used to train AI, disclosure of the model and how it performs, and making sure that there's continuous governance over these models, that we are the leading edge in terms of that regulation.
Whom?
Technology governance, organizational governance, rules and clarification that are needed that this
Which rules?
Congress,
I mean, this is your chance, folks, to tell us how to get this right. Please use it.
Right. I mean, I think, again, the rules should be focused on the use of AI in certain contexts. So if you look at, for example,
Such as?
so if you look at the EU AI Act, it has certain uses of AI that it says are just simply too dangerous and will be outlawed in the
Okay, so we ought to first pass a law that says you can use AI for these uses but not others. Is that what you're saying?
we need to define the highest risk uses
Is
of AI.
there anything else?
And then, of course, requiring things like impact assessments and transparency, requiring companies to show their work, protecting data that's used to train AI in the first place as well.
All right. Professor Marcus, if you could be specific, this is your shot, man. Talk in plain English and tell me what, if any, rules we ought to implement. And please don't just use concepts. I'm looking for specificity.
Number one, a safety review like we use with the FDA prior to widespread deployment. If you're going to introduce something to 100 million people, somebody has to have their eyeballs on it.
There you go. Okay, that's a good one.
Number-
Not sure I agree with it, but that's a good one. What else?
You didn't ask for 3 that you would agree with. Number two, a nimble monitoring agency to follow what's going on, not just pre-review, but also post as things are out there in the world with authority to call things back, which we've discussed today. And number 3 would be funding geared towards things like AI constitution, AI that can reason about what it's doing. I would not leave things entirely to current technology, which I think is poor at behaving in ethical fashion and behaving in honest fashion. And so I would have funding to try to basically focus on AI safety research. That term has a lot of complications in my field. There's both safety, let's say short-term and long-term, and I think we need to look at both. And rather than just funding models to be bigger, which is the popular thing to do, we need to
Let me
fund
cut you
models
off,
to be more trustworthy.
Because I want to hear from Mr. Altman. Mr. Altman, here's your shot.
Thank you, Senator. Number one, I would form a new agency that licenses any effort above a certain scale of capabilities and can take that license away and ensure compliance with safety standards. Number two, I would create a set of safety standards focused on what you said in your third hypothesis as the dangerous capability evaluations. One example that we've used in the past is looking to see if a model can self-replicate and self-exfiltrate into the wild. We can give your office a long other list of the things that we think are important there, but specific tests that a model has to pass before it can be deployed into the world. And then third, I would require independent audits. So not just from the company or the agency, but experts who can say the model is or isn't in compliance with these stated safety thresholds and these percentages of performance on question X or Y.
Senator Peter Welch then reversed things a little and posited that too much regulation could be a bad thing.
But there's also a legitimate concern about regulation getting in the way of things, being too cumbersome, and being a negative influence. So, two of the three of you have said you think we do need an agency. What are some of the perils of an agency that we would have to be mindful of in order to make certain that its goals of protecting many of those interests I just mentioned, privacy, bias, intellectual property, disinformation, would be the winners and not the losers? And I'll start with you, Mr. Altman.
Thank you, Senator. One, I think America has got to continue to lead. This happened in America. I'm very proud that it happened in America.
By the way, I think that's right, and that's why I'd be much more confident if we had our agency as opposed to got involved in international discussions. Ultimately, you want the rules of the road, but I think if we lead and get rules of the road that work for us, that is probably a more effective way to proceed.
I personally believe there's a way to do both, and I think it is important to have the global view on this because this technology will impact Americans and all of us wherever it's developed. But I think we want America to lead. We want.
So get to the perils issue, though, because I know.
Well, that's one. I mean, that is a
colleagues,
peril,
right?
which is you slow down American industry in such a way that China or somebody else makes faster progress. A second, and I think this can happen with, like, the regulatory pressure should be on us. It should be on Google. It should be on the other small set of people in the lead the most. We don't want to slow down smaller startups. We don't want to slow down open source efforts. We still need them to comply with things. You can still cause great harm with a smaller model, but leaving the room and the space for new ideas and new companies and independent researchers to do their work, and not putting a regulatory burden that, say, a company like us could handle, but a smaller one couldn't. I think that's another peril, and it's clearly a way that regulation has gone.
Okay. Mr. Marcus, or Professor Marcus?
The other obvious peril is regulatory capture. If we make it appear as if we are doing something, but it's more like greenwashing and nothing really happens. We just keep out the little players because we put so much burden that only the big players can do it. So there are also those kinds of perils. I fully agree with everything that Mr. Altman said, and I would add that to the list.
Okay. Ms. Montgomery?
One of the things I would add to the list is the risk of not holding companies accountable for the harms that they're causing today. Right, so we talk about misinformation in electoral systems.
So no
agency
Section
or no
230
agency,
kind of waiver here.
we need to hold companies responsible today and accountable for the AI that they're deploying that disseminates misinformation on things like elections and where the risk.
You know, a regulatory agency would do a lot of the things that Senator Graham was talking about. You know, you don't build a nuclear reactor without getting a license. You don't build an AI system without getting a license that gets tested independently.
I think it's a great analogy.
We need both pre-deployment and post-deployment.
Okay. Thank you all very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
And I couldn't agree more that in terms of consumer protection, which I've been doing for a while, participation by the industry is tremendously important, and not just rhetorically, but in real terms, because we have a lot of industries that come before us and say, oh, we're all in favor of rules, but not those rules. Those rules we don't like. And it's every rule, in fact, that they don't like. And I sense that there is a willingness to participate here that is genuine and authentic. I thought about asking ChatGPT to do a new version of Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, because that's what we need to be doing here. And as Senator Hawley has pointed out, Congress doesn't always move at the pace of technology, and that may be a reason why we need a new agency, but we also need to recognize the rest of the world is going to be moving as well. And you've been enormously helpful in focusing us and illuminating some of these questions, and performed a great service by being here today. So thank you to every one of our witnesses, and I'm going to close the hearing, leave the record open for 1 week. In case anyone wants to submit anything, I encourage any of you who have either manuscripts that are going to be published or observations from your companies to submit them to us. And we look forward to our next hearing. This one is closed.
And finally, in a sign that the world truly has gone AI crazy, one of English Premiership's football managers, Sam Allardyce, not renowned for his weighty insight into geopolitical, technological revolutions, weighed in at his latest weekly West Ham press conference, when supposedly there to talk about the crucial upcoming relegation survival match against Leeds United this weekend.
I mean, I do fear for our life as an old timer now. I fear for our life with social media and what it's bringing to the world. I know there's great stuff about that, but AI,
So there you go. Thanks, Sam, for that insight. And with that, we'll see you next time on EYE4AI, bringing artificial intelligence to all of humanity.